Our other reading is also from the New Testament, this from the Gospel according to Matthew, beginning at chapter 20. Jesus and his disciples continue on the road to Jerusalem, where he will be in the midst of Holy Week, what we know to be Holy Week. And as he gets closer, he continues to teach, to tell stories, and to heal. Jesus is speaking. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last, and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. We are on the road with Jesus again today, and as he approaches Jerusalem and all that awaits him there, his parables become more intense, difficult, challenging, like this one. And judging by my own first reaction to it, it might be good to stop, take a deep breath, and check in briefly with what exactly a parable is and what it isn't. The word parable comes from a Greek word that puts together two other words that mean to cast or to throw and alongside. A parable is a statement or a story that gets thrown alongside our day-to-day experience to give us another way of thinking about something. Fresh eyes. And if there's anything we need to look at this story, it's fresh eyes, a new way of thinking. A parable is not, on the other hand, an allegory. An allegory is a story in which each character is specifically written to represent some specific person, and only that person. For example, in an imaginary allegory that I don't even know if it exists, the king is the devil and the jester is Jesus. And those are the only possible interpretations because that's what the author meant. This is not true of parables, even though some parables get allegorized over time because we cling to certain interpretations. So let's try not to do that. Let's try to wonder about the characters in the story. Try to find fresh eyes to see them. It's easy to identify with those people who worked in the scorching sun all day, harvesting grapes, and who felt that the owner had given them a bad deal. But what about that owner? He seems to be a pretty unusual person, kind of weird, really. First weird thing, we find out halfway through the story that there's a manager for this vineyard. So why is the owner going out to find the workers? Second weird thing, the owner is obsessive in his hunt for workers. First he goes out early in the morning, then he goes out again a few hours later. In fact, He goes out every 2 or 3 hours all day until 1 hour before sunset. And each and every time, wherever he finds willing workers, he hires them. To the first hired, he promises the usual daily wage, which is 1 denarius. To those hired after that, he promises what is right. In the Greek, it's a little stronger. He promises what is just. Third weird thing, everybody is paid the same amount. Those who worked from early in the morning and those who worked just the last hour of the day all receive 1 denarius, the daily wage. And wow, I get it. This is hard to swallow. How can that be right? The ones hired early would never have expected more than their agreed upon rate, except that the guys who only worked 1 hour got that. The first arrivals got their hopes up. It's understandable. The whole thing's weird, but this is Jesus, and we operate under the principle that he has good news for us. He's the one who said, "Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers." There's good news here, but it requires a new way of looking, some fresh eyes. So what was it like to be the ones who came last? What is it like to wake up every morning unsure of where tonight's dinner will come from? That is the situation of the workers the owner of the vineyard keeps finding in the marketplace. In fact, it's the situation of every worker, early and late. And let's be honest, isn't it highly unlikely that any of these people rolled out of bed at 3:30 in the afternoon and said to themselves, I wonder if there's some fool down at the marketplace who will pay me for a whole day's work for 1 hour. Let me go see. Isn't it far more likely that all these workers have spent the day moving from marketplace to marketplace, from field to field, from town to town, in desperate search of that day's wage, that night's dinner? What brings us to another weirder thing about the owner of the vineyard. When he sees people looking for work, he seems never to include in his calculus what time it is, or how much money he's already committed, or even how much value he personally can get from the work. All he sees is, does this person need the work? Do they need to earn their daily bread, and probably their families? Can I give it to them? And he does. He does the loving thing. The owner is weird but loving. He looks at workers from a different perspective than we imagined. He looks to their good, not his own. I'm guessing most of us think of ourselves as the early morning category folks. We're kind of go-getters who get up early in the day, get to where we're supposed to be, put in our time. We tend to identify with those people who were complaining at the end of the day. But what does it feel like to be a latecomer? What are the implications? Showing up late can be embarrassing. The very threat of showing up late can cause us to decide to stay home, because what's the point? I was later than I wanted to be getting into the pool at the Y the other day, which in my mind meant I might not get in all the laps I needed to get in. And if there's anything I like to do, it's count my laps. And if I can't get in all my laps, maybe I just shouldn't bother. And I went anyway. But it can be incredibly important to show up, even if you're showing up late. A friend of mine went to a demonstration in her town in support of the Standing Rock water protectors last fall, and soon realized that she was the only identifiable clergy person there. She wrote, "I realized that simply showing up mattered. It mattered not because of who I am personally, but because of what I represent as a pastor in the Christian church. The important thing was to be there and to show the community that there are Christian leaders who love them and support their cause." And the truth is, a vineyard is a wondrous thing. The fruit of the vine is delicious and sweet, and it can be dried to make raisins, or crushed to release the sweet juices and make juice to drink, or fermented to make wine. In hot weather, you can freeze grapes, and they are amazing. In cold weather, you can open up a jar of jam that you made from the grapes, spread it on hot toast, sip some tea, and look outside at the cold, and think how sweet life is. Vineyards in the Bible are both literal and symbolic. Yes, they are things to possess and cultivate and work on and fight over, but they are also something else, something more. Vineyards in Scripture speak of God's love for us, of God's determination that we should have delicious life and have it in abundance, that we all, every single living human, we all deserve to have our own vine and fig tree and to live in peace, unafraid. Is it worth it to show up late for a project like that? To get to do even an hour of work that will further that particular agenda? You bet it is. And yet we're still left wondering about those early morning workers. Was this fair? How do we get past it? My friend Miller shared a parable about his godson, AJ, and about a day and a night when AJ was 5 and life just did not feel fair to him. Miller tells it like this. After tiny AJ had eaten an ice cream cone and some banana split Dippin' Dots at the New York State Fair, he was at the dinner table in the house, insisting that he wanted Pat Mitchell's ice cream for dessert. AJ's papas were away on a date that evening, and I listened from the kitchen as Corinne tried gently to explain that there was ice cream in the freezer that we could have after dinner, but that we wouldn't be making a trip to Pat Mitchell's that night. I remember that AJ was fairly calm, but it was a sort of distressed calm. He tried to reason and bargain. His voice was choked with emotion, and big tears welled up in his eyes. At one point, he threatened to ride his tricycle to every restaurant in Binghamton until he found his papas, who he insisted would let him go to Pat Mitchell's. He was dogged and absolutely undistractable. I finally came into the dining room and said, "Alfie, I don't know if it will help or not help to tell you that Pat Mitchell's is closed." The ethics and deliberately bent truth of this comment is up for consideration, just not at this time. His reaction surprised even me. Once he thought that the store was closed and not an option, immediately he was able to think about other things. He was able to eat his dinner. He was able to start a conversation about Spider-Man and dinosaurs and his favorite part of his day at the state fair. Suddenly, he was freed to be where he was and to see what was before him and to think about all the good things in the world that he loved or hoped for or already had. Miller continues, "Sometimes I don't feel much more together than my godson who was 5. Sometimes at 5, he had the wisdom of Solomon. All the what ifs and why didn't I say that and wishing I could go back a year or 13 and have a do-over, but I'm left. We are all pretty much left with what is on the table and in the freezer now, and all the things in the world that make us happy. So for what it's worth, I don't know if it will help or not help to tell you that Pat Mitchell's is closed. What will help to get you through that huge mental closed door?" 5-year-old AJ was given the gift of a new way of thinking, and it helped him to open a huge mental door that had been closed. Can we find our way to that gift? I can't tell you who each of us is in this parable. Are we the early arrivers, exhausted from a long, hot day of work? Are we the latecomers, still hoping to help with the project of sweet abundance? Are we the owner of the vineyard who only wants to offer as much as we can to as many as we can? Or are we the manager, just doing our job and hoping for the best? Lest this parable be misunderstood, Jesus is not telling us In no way is he telling us that workers should be satisfied with less than they deserve, with less than a living wage, less than what it takes to live without want. It's complainers who helped us get things like minimum wages and worker safety requirements. But that's not what this story is about. This story is about what does everybody need today, tonight? What does our humanity and our divinity tell us is the right thing to ensure that everyone has? And if we do not have enough, if we do have enough, how can we all get through the huge mental closed doors so that we can recognize that and live in gratitude rather than anxiety? This parable is about the delicious life God places before us, available to savor in every season, just because God is good. It's about the sweetness of God's project for humankind and God's love for us, of God's determination that early or late, we should all have delicious life and have it in abundance, that we all, every single human being, we all deserve to have our own vine and fig tree, to live in peace, unafraid. Thanks be to God. Amen.